Hey, what's up? John Sonmez from simpleprogrammer.com. So I've got another interview for you all today. This one I've been waiting for. I think this is going to be pretty good here. So we've got actually Carl Franklin, which you may know him from .NET Rocks, like probably not only probably the longest running developer podcast, but one of the longest running podcasts, like period, like in the world, like seriously in the world here. So anyway, I'll let Carl introduce himself a little bit more. But thanks for joining, Carl.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be here. I don't know how I should introduce myself, except I've been a developer for a long time. I've been a musician for a long time, and I've been a public radio freak ever since I was a kid. My mother's listened to public radio shows, so I love that sort of edutainment thing, the car talk guys, and what do you know, and wait, don't tell me, and all of these great podcasts. Well, this is even before that, but so when .NET came out, I wanted to use that format to educate and communicate with the community. And so I started interviewing people that I knew as a regional director, both at Microsoft and outside of Microsoft, and putting these and Mark Dunn was my co-host at the time. And we just started putting the MP3s on the website and sending emails to people who are, taking my classes or also were fans of the Carl and Gary's VB homepage from the way back then. I had a nice little list of fans going, and it just sort of snowballed. And so that was 2002.
Wow.
The word podcast came into the vernacular. I think it was 2004 or 2005, but yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a lot of, it's funny because a lot of people in the simple programmer audience, I help developers to build businesses and to build reputations, market themselves and stuff. And I'm like, you got to hit it for a long time before it, really so many people do it for a year or, so, and it's, you don't see traction until you've made it further than 90% of everyone else makes it. So. But what I wanted to talk about with Carl today is actually what really caught my attention that I thought would be really cool, since I've been doing, I'm always in crazy diets and stuff, fitness stuff here on Simple Programmer, but Carl has been doing a ketogenic diet, not just a ketogenic diet, but he's lost a lot of weight, and he started a podcast about ketogenic diets. And I think this is something that I think a lot of developers could use some info and encouragement on. So I thought that'd be kind of cool to have Carl talk about his experience and what is he up to.
Happy to. Well, I think this way of eating and this lifestyle, and it really is a lifestyle change. However, it's probably the easiest lifestyle change I've ever had to make, just because I feel so good and I don't miss any of the stuff I used to do and used to eat. It's perfect for developers because we are sedentary people.
Yeah.
And the lifestyle itself sort of gives you the benefits of exercise without actually having to kill yourself exercising. And exercising gets more and more difficult the more obese you get. And it puts more strain on your muscles and things. And so, a common wish of people who are severely overweight is that they could diet to lose enough weight where they feel good enough to exercise without a lot of pain and joint pain and bone pain. And I mean, it really puts a lot of stress on your knees and on your ankles and things. So I think it's a perfect mix. And I guess I'll start with what it is. And ketogenic is, it's just another word for the ultimate low-carb diet. It's sort of like the induction phase of Atkins, where you lower your carbohydrates to 20 grams or less. Scientifically and accurately, 50 grams or less of carbs per day is enough to get you into mild ketosis, but we tend to go as low as we possibly can. In other words, we get carbs from green leafy vegetables, Brussels sprouts, salads, a few carrots here and there. They have a little sugar, and not so many onions because they have a little sugar, but spinach, and most of our carbs come from that. Occasional nuts, almonds, and macadamias, but not really much. And then protein is the other macronutrient, and this is one that Atkins didn't pay really enough attention to. It turns out that there's, yeah, you're nodding your head. It turns out that there's an ultimate, it turns out that there's a particular amount of protein that you need to eat every day that's according to your lean muscle mass and how much you weigh without any fat, essentially. And that can be calculated. For me, it's about 100 grams of protein a day. And so I try to get at least 100 grams a day. If I eat 200 grams, it's not going to, you know, that extra 100 grams is actually going to go back into the metabolic cycle and get burned as fuel. It won't be synthesized as protein. So, and it does tend to raise your insulin a little bit, but not as much as carbohydrates do. So I try to stay around 100 grams of protein a day. But the rest of my caloric intake comes from fat, and it's either fat that's on my plate or fat that's from, as Richard Morris likes to say, that Krispy Kreme that I ate a decade ago that's hanging out on my body.
Yeah.
But I found out that just that alone isn't enough information for people to succeed on this diet. And the things they have going against them is years and years of institutions, health institutions, government institutions, telling us that fat is bad and it kills you and it gives you heart disease and stuff, which has turned out to be complete rubbish. And when I say rubbish, I'm not just talking about, you know, my opinion. This is Carl says it's rubbish. No, go look it up. Read The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. This was The Economist magazine's #1 science book of 2014. She found dozens of studies that have essentially been ignored or buried because of the powers that be don't want to believe it, that essentially disprove the original diet heart hypothesis by Ancel Keyes, when he posited that eating saturated fat leads to heart disease. It has not been able to been proved. And I don't know if that grammar is right. It has never been proven. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And not only that, but the null hypothesis has been proven. In other words, there's not only no effect, no detrimental effect, but there seems to be a protective effect. The difference is that when you lower your carbohydrates and you increase your fat, you have to do both at the same time. It's not really one or the other. If you eat a lot of carbohydrates and bread and pasta and potatoes and stuff and sugar, and you also eat saturated fat, that saturated fat's going to get stored. Not only that, but the carbohydrates that you eat are going to turn into a really deadly kind of triglyceride fat that turns into small, dense LDL particles that are the root cause of heart disease. They get stuck in your inflamed arteries, and the inflammation comes from the carbohydrates as well, high insulin levels. Yeah. And this is all science. You can look it up. Don't take my word for it. So basically, we know more now in the last 10 years about nutrition, and especially about fat, eating fat and protein and all of this stuff, and what to expect on a ketogenic diet. So it's not just that you eat that ketogenic diet, but it's sort of like you follow a pattern. And the pattern is that we see in our community and the podcast and the 1,000 people that are in our Facebook group and people that write to us, the pattern seems to be that you do this for 4 to 6 weeks until you go through this flu-like symptom where you feel kind of groggy, you know, and this is because your body is changing from its fuel source from glucose to fat, and it's not really good yet at processing either, right? Your liver, once that happens, starts converting fat to glucose that's required for the cells in your body that require glucose, right? That's called gluconeogenesis. And those are red blood cells and your eyes and brain cells. Some of your brain needs glucose. But the rest of it, including your brain, switches to run on ketones, which are a byproduct of burning fat. So after you get through that flu in this fat adaptation phase, you typically hit a plateau. And this is where a lot of people, if they haven't given up Atkins at the flu because they think, all this fat is making me sick, I got to stop this. Because they don't know. And 2, they get to the plateau and they say, well, that's that. I've had my run. It doesn't work anymore. I'm going back to eating waffles and, you know, carbohydrates. And so that's where they give up. And we've found that the antidote for that is either exercise, which you would want to do because you have all this energy, right? But if you are still too overweight to exercise, fast.
Yes. Yep.
And fasting, the expert on fasting, Dr. Jason Fung, the book is The Obesity Code. And he basically has disproven all of the myths around fasting and how dangerous it is. It's been practiced for thousands and thousands of years by every major religion as a way of sort of detoxifying your body and soul. And it really does work. And there was just a study that came out last year that fasting for 3 days will completely regenerate your immune system when you start feeding again.
Autophage. Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah. So fasting for just 60 hours or 3 days, 72 hours, whatever, you'll get hungry around hour 18, maybe around hour 24, and maybe the second day a little bit. You drink some salt water. You have to take more salt and also electrolytes when you do this, both the keto and fasting. And then you'll see a dramatic plunge right through your plateau, and then you can keep going. Now you have options. Now you can choose to skip meals, eat 1 meal a day like you do,
exactly,
like I do, and you can you're in control. And that's really the key. That what we want is we want control. We don't want to feel like I don't know if back when I used to eat bad, I would think about McDonald's.
Yeah.
Burgers.
Yeah.
All day long. I'd be thinking, oh, I just got to get out. I'm going to get some of the Big Macs and, whatever, fries. And you're just like you're thinking about this stuff. It's distracting. I can do that if I want to, but it kind of makes me feel like crap now, so I won't. Exactly. Anyway, that's the ketogenic. That's what we've learned in 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, that's a really good summary. Like there's a few things like, well, yeah, you mentioned, and obviously that I eat 1 meal a day. I've been doing that for 2 years now, and I'm not losing muscle. I don't know if people have noticed. Like, I mean, I'm fasting, so I'm lean. I'm like, I and most of my diet, 70% of my diet is fat,
right.
Probably, and I'm at like 8% body fat. Like I do not lose muscle. I do not, and I'm way healthier than I used to be. And I used to be a bodybuilder. I used to do bodybuilder diet. I used to eat 6 or 7 meals a day, high carbohydrate, and I am in better shape than I've ever been in my life. And I like the mental aspect of it too. It's like, the eating 1 meal a day, it's like you're not thinking about food all day, and then you don't have to if you have 2,000 calories that you have to fit into 1 meal, you can kind of splurge a little. Like you can actually feel satisfied instead of splitting up, being on a restricted diet and trying to split 2,000 calories or less amongst 3 meals or whatever. That's just, you're never fulfilled. So you can most people say, oh, I can't make it, 1 meal a day. But then it's like, well, if you think about it, like, at the end of the day, I get to go and eat my meal, and I can, or whenever you do it, then I think it gives you something to look forward to instead of like a diet where you're just like all the time deprived.
You feel like a slave to food, right? So
yeah,
you're absolutely right, John. The other thing we found out was a lot of people think that they can't do it because they say to themselves, "I can never give up bread."
Yeah.
I can never give up bread. Well, first of all, we have substitutes for bread that are in pizza and things like this that are going to you're going to love it. First of all. Number two, if you think about that phrase, I can never give up bread. Well, that's you now as a glucose burner.
Exactly.
Because you have gut bugs that are like controlling your mind saying, you got to go to McDonald's, man. You got to get pizza, right? But you do this for a couple of days, they die.
Yep.
They're gone. Their voices are silenced. And I like to, this is a really good analogy. You have poison ivy.
Yep.
And it feels really good when you scratch it.
Yeah.
And you can't imagine not being able to scratch your itch. Oh, I can't stop scratching my itch. Okay, well, what if we could take away the itch?
Right.
Isn't the goal to not have poison ivy? So we don't understand this because it's been our natural state. Most of us who are alive today grew up on high carbs. We don't know any other metabolic state. But 100 years ago, everybody was ketogenic. Everybody was in ketosis for the
Yeah.
most part, because there wasn't, the carbs that were available were pretty much good carbohydrates until food became, it was really around World War I and World War II, and Ancel Keyes had a lot to do with it, actually. He's the K and K rations. He developed the K rations for the Army. It was all about prolonging shelf life. And so trans fats came into it. But even before that, there was just this huge boom in bad carbohydrate food in the industrial, not in the industrial revolution, but in the the food manufacturing boom that happened around the 20s. All the sodas, all the grain cereals, the brownie mixes, cake mixes, all the stuff that takes up the aisles didn't exist. And we cooked with lard and tallow and butter, and those were our oils. And guess what? No heart disease. And heart disease creeped in at around the Korean War in the 50s, and it escalated to what we have now, which is this crazy obesity, diabetes epidemic. And there are other diseases too: liver diseases, kidney diseases, Alzheimer's, cancer. They're actually finding that returning to nutritional ketosis, and I say returning to because it's really our original metabolic state. Returning to nutritional ketosis is shrinks tumors.
Oh yeah. There's like this study where they showed that like the mitochondria inside of cancer cells, it could not metabolize fats, ketones, but the rest of your body could. Yeah. And so then the idea was like, if you fasted and you're in ketosis, that you could actually starve the cancer cells. Not all, but in certain cases of cancers, there's definitely promising studies in this area where you could starve the cancer cells and the rest of the body is okay. Because one of the biggest problems that they have with cancer treatment is that muscle preservation. Like, people die because a lot of times their body can't make it through the chemo or the other or radiation therapy, because they basically waste away. Yeah. And so one nice thing about ketosis and fasting is that it actually preserves muscle mass, because biologically the organism needs muscle to be able to go kill something and survive.
This is a great quote or sentiment by Dr. Jason Fung. And he says, people say, well, if you fast, you'll waste away to nothing. And it's nonsense. And here's why. Evolutionary, if that happened, right?
Right.
If that happened, if we weren't able to utilize our body fat and burn it as fuel when we fasted, he says the body would be stupid. He says, why do we think the body's so stupid?
Right.
He says it's like storing piles and piles of firewood, and then when it gets cold, you throw the sofa on the fire, burn the sofa. It's that stupid. I love that. I love this guy. So so evolutionary speaking, you've got plenty of food, and then you hit a dry spell, like all the animals have gone away, basically don't have any food. The first thing that happens after the first day or so is you get a boost of adrenaline.
Yep.
And you get a boost of protective human growth hormone, and which protects your muscles from being catabolized.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, and this is all science. I'm not making this up.
And that makes you in an anabolic state. You're actually better primed. In fact, I'm doing this crazy diet right now. I've got this, I'm actually going to be putting out a program, but what I do is like, I'm fasted right now. It'll be about 3 o'clock. I'll go and do my workout. Right before then, I'll take some carbs, and then I'm going to hit the gym hard. So I've been in ketosis. Well, I haven't been in ketosis, but I've been carb restricted. So yesterday I didn't eat any carbohydrates, a very small amount of carbohydrates, and I ran,
So you are in ketosis.
I'm probably close, like minor, like, cause it's only been a day, but I'm super insulin sensitive, like right now. So if I take a little bit of carbs and reactivate that system, and then I eat, or I lift weights, and then I'm going to eat carbs afterwards. Yeah. All that's going to go into glycogen stores. I'm going to be like pumped up, and then tomorrow will be and then after I eat that meal, I'll be fasting until tomorrow.
You'll be back in ketosis.
Yeah, and then at 3 o'clock tomorrow, I won't eat. I'll run for 10 miles, and then when I come back, I'll eat fat. And it's like, it's playing with that mechanism, and it's crazy too. Like the idea is like, a lot of people are like, oh, I can't work out. I can't function. I'm like, well, that's kind of funny, because I fast and I run 10 miles fasted. Yeah. So I
They're
seem to
also
be
finding
fine, you
they're
know.
also finding that athletes, big athletes, and a guy to look at is Dr. Peter Attia.
Oh
Uh,
yes, yes.
yeah, he was a long distance runner, I believe, or swimmer,
Yep.
and he was fit and he was eating well, like he was eating whole grains and low fat and all this stuff, but he had this belly fat he couldn't shake. And he was swimming. He was like a serious athlete, right?
Yeah, he swam the Maui Channel, I believe. Like
You're right.
yeah.
Yeah. And then he discovered the well-formulated ketogenic diet. And I believe the book, the Bible of this is The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living by Volek and Finney,
Yeah.
another in the trifecta of books that we ought to read. Anyway, these guys were talking about the well-formed ketogenic diet, and he became an advocate for it after he, cleared up his belly fat. And his experiments and the stuff that he shows is that performance athletes, marathon runners, have like a 30% edge over glucose burners. They can run and run and run and run and run and draw down on their body fat for energy, and they don't bonk. Like, glucose burners, you see the marathon runners constantly replenishing their carbohydrates, or else they'll fall down.
Oh yeah.
Because the glycogen is what you were talking about. There's only about 2,000 calories or so.
Yeah, about 500 grams. Yep, 2,000 calories.
Yeah, about 2,000 calories
Some
of
of
glucose
it in your liver. Yep.
Yeah, and glycogen.
Yeah, in fact, when marathoners hit the wall at around mile 20, it's because they've burned about 2,000 calories. They've depleted liver glycogen and then muscle glycogen, and now their body has to forcefully switch to burning ketones. It has to go to fat burning, and so it's funny too. Like, if you think about this, like just like from just thinking about this, right? You have to run 20 miles before your body switches to burning fat.
Yeah.
So if you want to lose weight and and there's a difference between losing weight and losing fat. If you want to lose fat, shouldn't you switch your body over to the fat burning mode as soon as possible? Right. Yeah. Makes sense to me, right?
And you do that by doing this ketogenic diet and it takes anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. It could take a few months to become fully fat adapted, but fat adaptation is a scale. And it's not ketosis. It's you get better and better and better at burning it. In other words, what happens is your organs work in more efficiency. The brain needs a certain amount of ketones and it evens out, and then the liver knows how many it needs. And so it only produces as much as the brain needs, right? So that this is why the pee strips are kind of a waste of time too, because first of all, they measure the excess that's leaving your body, not that is being utilized by your body. If you think about it, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And also they only measure one of 3 types of ketones. And the big one, which you start producing after you're completely fat adapted, is oxybutyrate. What is it?
Oh yeah, beta oxybutyrate.
Beta hydroxybutyrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, say that 3 times fast. But that one is not. You can only detect that with like a blood ketone detector. But exactly. I mean, your breath smells bad, and
exactly.
You're never hungry, and
it's amazing how much, and it's I constantly am battling with doctors today because they don't understand this, and they're like, even today we're at this point where like doctors still tell you to limit dietary cholesterol,
right?
Because that study is old. Like, dietary cholesterol does not influence internal cholesterol.
And don't take our word for it. Actually, you want to read a good book, read the Cholesterol Clarity by Jimmy Moore. And he isn't a doctor, but he basically rounds up all the studies and all the doctors who have done the studies and interviews them and presents their science. So I got a story for you.
Okay, yeah.
I've been doing, I was diagnosed with diabetes in June 2015, and type 2 diabetes, of course. I was at NDC speaking there, and I got the phone call from my doc, and I think my HbA1c, which is a measure of glucose in the blood over 3 months. It's a 3-month average because it's basically red blood cells, and red blood cells last 3 months. Therefore, you get an average, right?
Right.
And it was 7.9, which is above the threshold for type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is just a number that they said, okay, it was, if your blood sugar is steadily up here, that means your insulin is less effective and it's beginning to spiral out of control. So I sort of went in denial for about 6 months. And then in February, I went on this ketogenic diet. In 2.5 months, my A1C was 6.3 or 4 or something like that. I can't remember. It was below. It was in the pre-diabetes range, but it was lower. Okay. And I had lost like 35 pounds or something like that. And my doctor was amazed. She was just like, she was blown away. She was like, "You're my rock star. Like I don't have any other patients that have done what you've done. I know how you did it." And I had asked her if I could go on a ketogenic diet, and she had heard of it. And she said, "Yeah, by all means." I was through the roof. It was high before, and it had come down. However, my triglycerides had also come down. My HDL had gone up, but my LDL was way up, right? And she was scared, and I brought all the science printed out. It was great.
Nice. They love that when you do that.
Oh yeah, it's a love-hate thing because you know it's like, oh yeah, science. Oh. So she said, you know, she was freaking out. She was like physically shaken, and I said,
Wow.
look, can you show me any science that says that eating, you know, saturated fat and high LDL is a high cholesterol is an indicator of heart disease? Do you show me that science? And she said, no, I can't. And I said, yeah, okay, but you're a doctor. So why are you having this reaction? Is it just like in the air? Did somebody, you know, how did you get this idea, you know? And she couldn't tell me. And I said, well, you know, here's some studies to the contrary. And I said, I tell you what, if you're worried about heart disease, let's do a test for heart disease. And she goes, perfect. She sits back and she thinks about it. She says, you know, I have seen this, that, you know, anytime I have a patient who's looking good and everything's fine, and their blood is good, and they drop dead of a stroke, or they have a heart attack. Maybe they don't die, but they have a stroke or heart attack. She says they always seem to have plaquing in their carotid arteries, you know, and she said, I could give you an ultrasound scan of your carotid arteries and they could tell me whether there's plaquing or not. And I said, great. I was pretty confident.
Yeah.
The result, no plaquing.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
No plaquing.
Yeah.
So that pretty much put the kibosh on her fear right there. And all the other family members who were wagging their fingers at me said because, you know, I was eating too much fat. Richard Morris, who does the podcast with me, you might have known him. He was in the speaking circuit several years ago, and he was the CTO of Developer Express. And he got his A1C was over 11.
Wow.
His triglycerides were like 1,100. Bad.
Wow. That's like you're walking eyesight. Dead, right?
Yeah,
wow.
He was losing his eyesight. He almost lost a toe. He was there.
Wow.
He was at the abyss. Ketogenic diet in 6 months, no sign of diabetes. A1C was down in the 5 range. His cholesterol had dropped. His triglycerides were way down. And he just did this other test called a calcium heart score, which is essentially an X-ray of your heart beating. Like it's a picture. You can actually see the calcium buildup in your heart. And so if there's any plaquing, which is really the one of the two causes of a heart attack or stroke, is you have inflamed arteries, and then plaque builds up, calcium builds up to protect the inflammation so that there's no bursting. The calcium is actually a protective measure that your body does. It sort of strengthens and shores up your arteries. And so if there's calcium, that means there's inflammation. If there's inflammation, that means these small, dense LDL particles could get stuck in them and puncture through them. And that's where you have, in the case of the heart, a heart attack, and in the case of your blood vessels in your brain, a stroke. So 0 plaquing. He had a score of 0.
Wow.
After being ketogenic for 2 years. 0. And this guy eats more fat than anyone could possibly stomach.
Man, I need him to be my cook. I keep seeing his like Facebook pictures and I'm like, oh man, it
Yeah.
would be so easy to eat keto if you could eat that all the time. He's got some, that's
Yeah.
amazing though.
So let's talk about what we eat.
Yeah, yeah.
Mark Miller and his wife were over for lunch today, and we made Fathead Pizza.
Okay.
Fathead Pizza is a staple among low carbers. It's basically a crust that you make from mozzarella cheese and cream cheese that you put in the microwave and just heat up for a minute and a half in the microwave. And then you add some almond flour and an egg and stir it up, and it becomes stretchy and doughy. And then you spread it out on wax paper on a cookie sheet and bake it at 425 for like 20 minutes, and it gets golden brown and crispy.
Nice.
And then you put toppings on it, all the toppings you want, and it's really, really low carb, and it's great. And we go nuts with it. And I made a shrimp scampi pizza today with that. So I cut up some shrimp, sauteed them in butter and garlic and wine, salt and pepper,
Yeah.
and laid that on top. I brushed olive oil on the crust, laid that on top, some mozzarella cheese, some Asiago cheese, some basil on that. Fire that in the oven, man. I'm telling you, that's like, it's pizza. You can't tell me it's not pizza. In fact, my kids like it better than pizza. We do keto tacos, where we make the shells out of cheese.
Oh yeah. Yep.
We make bread called oopsie bread, which is essentially egg whites and egg yolks and cream cheese blended together and puffed up in little rounds and stuff, and it's bread. It's like French toast bread.
I do one of the easy things that I do, like on the run days when I'm eating keto, is I will just take some heavy whipping cream and I'll take a tub of cream cheese and I'll just whip up the heavy whipping cream. Yeah. Take the cream cheese, mix that in there, throw like a scoop or two of peanut butter in there, and throw a bunch of Splenda in there or Truvia. And mix that all up, and you've got, I mean, you're eating like cream cheese. Fudge. Like it's cheesecake basically.
It's like cheesecake fudge. Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as sweeteners go, this is another thing we found. Everybody is a unique snowflake, and some people have reactions to different sweeteners. And we really suggest that people do experiments, and you can experiment by one of every sweetener, right?
Yep.
And get yourself a blood glucose meter. I have one right here that, if you're diabetic, you can get these, but if you want to just pay for one, you can. And it's a kit. It's got a little thing. You prick your finger and you put it on a little node, and it tells you what your blood sugar is in about 5 seconds. So you do that before you're going to test something and you haven't eaten in a long time. And then you mix up the sweetener and water. It doesn't matter how much, just some, enough so you can taste it. Yep. And then drink it, and then wait for like 30 minutes and take your blood sugar again. Try it again in an hour. Just write it down. We're geeks, man. We love science. We love data. Write it down. Yep. Make a spreadsheet. And I found that maltitol knocks me out of ketosis.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Even stevia does something weird to me. I don't know what it is, but xylitol, it turns out, is my sweetener of choice, and it tastes the most like sugar, and so I love it. I use that. Nice. I use that.
Okay, yeah, you have to be careful too. Like sometimes those little Splenda packets too, those are like when some companies are so like, because the dietary, like the labeling, they do it to the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law. So
yeah, totally.
You can have like 1 gram of Splenda can have 1 gram of sugar in it too. Like it's like it's like, or it's 1 gram of carb, right? So it shows as 0, but it's really because it's under that amount. So there's a little bit, there's like trace carbs and stuff, which is, for the most part, it doesn't cause trouble. But when someone is like drinks like 20 Diet Cokes, or they like, they eat all this 0 carb food and they eat so much of it, then they can knock themselves out of ketosis.
Yeah. And we have people in our group that just they're done with sweeteners. They've been surprised too many times. They can't control it. And they, and that's probably a good idea. And it's also probably a good idea not to go for bars or packaged foods in general. Eat real food. So I love to cook anyway, and I used to love to cook stuff that was actually harming me, and it's because it had too many carbs. But it's the same food I used to eat. I just don't make mashed potatoes now, and I don't
Exactly.
miss them. I swear, this is the thing. You won't believe it, but
Yeah.
you won't miss it. You'll be like, what? Mashed potatoes? What?
Besides, vegetables taste so good when you can dunk them in butter. When you can just like
Yeah,
fry them up in the most butter, then they're awesome. Like
that's right.
you can do cauliflower if you really like mashed potatoes, cauliflower with a bunch of cheddar cheese and
Yeah.
butter in there, and it gets the same consistency. But
You can eat out just about anywhere except a pasta shop or a pizza place. But even then, you could go, if everybody's going out for pizza, you could get like a small with everything and just
yeah,
eat the top.
exactly.
You could do that. So it's all doable.
Yeah, yeah, it's
And
definitely.
by the way, as of today, I've lost 66 pounds
Oh wow, that's awesome.
since February 1st. And I've done that pretty much with no exercise. I'm still, 300 pounds. So it's kind of hard for me to exercise yet, but I'm really, really looking forward to it. I mean, I do walk once in a while, but that isn't really, my tool yet for depleting glycogen. I don't have any glycogen to deplete, or I have less than most people, for getting my blood sugar down. I stick with fasting right now. And
Yeah.
right now I
Yep.
eat, my pattern is I eat one meal a day, but I started dinner like you. In fact, talking to you on .NET Rocks was what got me thinking I should eat one meal a day.
Yeah.
And I started with dinner, and I found out I really wasn't losing. I wasn't gaining any weight, but I wasn't really losing any either. And then I switched to lunch, and like lo and behold, I'm losing a pound a day.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
that. Yeah. That makes sense. Like it depends. Like I've tried different things, and at first I was like, oh well, I'd kind of like to eat breakfast, but breakfast didn't work for me very well because eating one meal a day breakfast, it sucks going that long and then going to sleep
yeah,
with no
yeah.
food. So
Right.
lunch is probably pretty good because it's in between.
Hmm.
For me, I eat a pretty early dinner. I eat at 5, so
Yeah,
that works for me. But yeah,
yeah.
it's amazing. You adapt to it, and then
Right.
it becomes so much better. So you don't have to worry about cooking food. You can just, you know,
I think people just really need to know that it isn't a crazy diet. It was our original diet. We got to get back to it. And
yeah,
I don't mean to go all caveman and paleo on everybody, but just come on, just think for a second. Before we had all of these crazy everything, all these crazy cookies and crackers and stuff, and then before we had medicines to deal with these diseases, before we had anything, we survived, we thrived. You
right,
know, we thrived. Our bodies are meant for this environment, the world. They're meant to hunt. One of the reasons we became the dominant species is because we could outrun animals, because we can sweat and we can burn fat, which lasts forever. And we can just
exactly.
keep going and running and running and running. And, after a while, a deer has got to stop because it can't go on. It's just got to fall down.
And when you look at the animal kingdom, like to the
Fall.
other animals, it's not like animals are like, oh, it's lunchtime. All right, lions,
Yeah.
get gather around.
Right.
Let's eat our lunch. Oh, it's dinner time. It's like, I
Right.
mean, like a lion, it like goes like
Yeah.
4 days, and then it gets a kill, and then it eats, and then it's fasting for 4 or 5 days. I mean, and it's not
Yeah.
just lions. I mean, it's a lot of
Yeah, they're all in ketosis, right? So,
yeah,
so it's a natural state. And here's another question I get. The whole vegan question is very tricky, and there's a lot of people who have ethical aversions to eating meat, and I totally respect that. But I had this argument with a vegan once who said, our bodies weren't made to eat meat. I mean, just you can look at our body, and I say, well, yes, we were. And they say, well, how do you know? I say, because I like it.
yeah, true. Yeah,
Animals don't eat what they eat because somebody told them it was good for them.
right.
They like it. I smell burgers on the grill. I'm like, oh, I gotta have some of that. It's like that's what I want.
Yeah, try to make a cat eat something it doesn't want to eat,
Yeah,
but doesn't
right,
like.
right.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, it's like
They
we
know.
don't trust our brains more than we trust our bodies. I think sometimes, and we try to leave the body and live in the mind, as James Taylor would say.
Yeah. Plus, I think, honestly, I think the thing that's killing us more than anything else is high fructose corn syrup. That's like, I think that's like the thing. It's like even within the carb realm, it's like, because it's like, well, it's what you're discovering with the whole heart disease and everything. It's because that spikes your insulin. If you watch your insulin level, your glucose level, it spikes your insulin so high so quickly because of that. It's not a naturally occurring. It's such a concentration. Is that you're basically when your blood is full of glucose, you're basically killing so like it causes inflammation. It causes you're destroying your body.
Right.
So
yeah, it is sort of the ultimate concentrated carb, isn't it?
Yep.
And that's really why, and it's so cheap, and that's why it's used everywhere. So yeah, but anybody who cuts out sugar, cuts out a lot, cuts down on carbs like bread and pasta and potatoes, and cuts down on ice cream and candy and stuff like that, you're going to see a health benefit. But it's really, unless you, and this is a fundamental number, unless you get below 50 grams of carbs a day, you're still going to have that, you're still going to be in that insulin carb cycle where you're going to have cravings and all of that stuff. So in order to cut that down and to start the process of adapting to burning fat, you really have to go below that. And so there you go. And all the rest of what ketogenic lifestyle is follows from that fundamental thing. You have to have this amount of protein. There's no getting around it. And then, well, where does the rest come from? Well, it ain't coming from, sugar. So it's got to come from fat.
Oh, that's the other one that I messed up with a long time, because I experimented with ketogenic diet. So gosh, like more than 15 years ago when it was first, and I would do like zero carb, and everyone would think I was crazy, but I wasn't getting the effect. I wasn't getting the benefit, right? And I was doing a lot of bodybuilding back then, and I didn't know until recently, like in the last maybe like 5 years, and I figured out what my problem was way back then was because protein turns into glucose. They get, it can. And so I was kicking myself out of ketosis because being a bodybuilder, I was thinking, oh, I need to just like, I'm going to eat. So my diet was, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do 70% protein and 30% fat. Yeah. And that was just like a recipe for disaster, because there was no way. It's better to be 70% fat and 30% protein, or somewhere along there. I've even gone as high as 90% fat before. And man, when you're at 90% fat, it's just so hard to do. But I was feeling my best because my testosterone was through the roof. I was just like, in such an anabolic state because of that. But it's hard, because even like I was eating macadamia nuts and pouring oil on them, and
and people are like, "What are you doing? You're killing yourself." It's like, okay. Rant on. That was the finger wagging from family members was actually a big deterrent for me in committing before. I had done it, but I was all alone, and I had no community, and I had no support. Yeah. And there was nobody out there like you, and Richard Morris telling me, hey, it's really okay. Here's the science, just keto on, there was nobody doing that. And so, I would tell my family members, oh, I've lost all this weight. Oh, what are you eating? And I tell them, and they're like, you better not eat that fat. You don't eat that so much fat. You're going to kill yourself. You're going to wind up in the hospital. You'll be dead. And I just want to, it's just like, what? You're crazy. So this time I said, you know what? We actually made T-shirts that say, show me the science. Yeah. And that's my standard reply now when somebody says, I'm like, okay, where did you hear that? Let's find out where you heard that. And, because I have a stack of research right here, that says you're wrong. Yep. So I don't mind telling you you're wrong. Be right. When you say something, know what you're saying.
Yeah, I think there's two factors that go on there, and you're absolutely right. I've dealt with this all the time. I'm always self-experimenting on myself, and so I've gone through all kinds of. But I think the first factor is that there's just so much bad information, right? People think breakfast is the most important meal of the day. People think that fruits are good for you. A lot of scientists now classify fructose as not a carcinogen, but as a poison, because fructose can only be used to replenish liver glycogen. Right. And it can't even go into muscles. It's
only 2,000 calories worth there when it's full. And when it's full and you start adding more fruit and sugar, guess what? It turns into fat. Exactly. It gets stored as fat, folks. Fruit gets stored as fat. Here, let me say it again. Yeah, that watermelon you're eating is going to be stored as fat.
And when you think about it, right, like, and this is what, like, historically, this makes sense, right? Because when you think about like the fat, you know, if you look back in time and you look at like the Nero, right, Roman Empire's fat Roman Empire, you know, or like in India, you know, you were wealthy if you were fat. How do you think How do you think they got fat? They're always eating fruit, right?
They had access to a lot of fruit. Yep.
Yeah. But
well,
but yeah,
there's foie gras. Okay, fatty liver disease is another one. Foie gras is essentially fatty liver disease that is brought on by force feeding what? Grains.
Yes. Yep.
To ducks. If we're force feeding grains to ducks, their liver looks like that. Guess what? Your liver probably looks like that too. Exactly. And so this is another great thing that Richard Morris had done. He had his, I can't remember if it was a biopsy or an x-ray or some way that they looked at his liver and determined that he had fatty liver disease before he started the ketogenic diet. And he just got it done again and it was gone. It's like, and the same with, but eyesight's another one.
Yeah.
Eyesight reverts to what it was before you were diabetic. It just happened to me. These glasses here, these are the glasses, and I know because they have the tips on them. These are the glasses that I had before I was diabetic. Let me see if I have the other one. Oh yeah, I have the other ones right here. Sorry about that. These, they look exactly the same because they are the same frames and everything, but I lost the tips. So this is how I know that these are my long distance glasses, and I was using those all the time when I was diabetic. And then one day I left these on the desk, and I was wearing my old ones, and I could see, and I didn't even realize it until I took them off and went to bed and said, hey, these aren't the ones I should be wearing. I was driving, like I couldn't drive with these. If I looked up at the stars, I would see blotches, and that just completely went away. And that just happened to me after 4 months.
It's amazing too. I wonder if that has something to do with the fasting aspect of it too, because there's that whole autophage, like one of the benefits of fasting is the fact that your body will basically eat itself. Like it'll kill when it does that, it kills the weaker cells. Yeah. And so it regenerates. Like your entire, like you said, I think your whole red blood cells will replenish after
blood cells.
Oh yeah, white blood cells. And then go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that there is a scientific reason for why diabetes causes blindness and all of that, and that is that you have so much sugar in your blood that your body starts thinning it out with water that it takes from parts of your body where there is pure water, and one of those is your eyes. So it's actually taking water out of your eyes to thin the blood, the glucose that's in your blood. Isn't that fascinating?
Oh, I see. That's interesting. So it's kind of like the whole effect of brining something, like it's drawing out the water through osmosis. Like
and and essentially cataracts are glucose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and don't quote me on that, but somebody told me that. I haven't fact checked it, but I mean one way that you get cataracts is by extra glucose in your blood. There's other ways I think too, but so you're seeing a reversal of fatty liver. A reversal of heart disease symptoms, no calcium, no carotid artery, plaquing. You're seeing weight loss. You're seeing a drop in blood pressure. You're seeing a drop in triglycerides, which are really a measure of nasty lipids that are, the small dense lipids, and an increase in HDL, which is good. And your LDL will probably, if you have a lot of weight, like me to get rid of, your LDL may go up, but it eventually comes back down. And Stephen Phinney, who's one of the masters of low carb and one of the authors of the Art and Science of Low Carb Living, he surmises that this is when your LDL goes up, this is the cholesterol that's in your fat cells escaping your fat cells and entering your bloodstream and being flushed out by your liver. And then the bile, you excrete it out with bile. And so there you go. You're actually removing your own fat. You're eating that Krispy Kreme that you had a decade ago, and it's turning into cholesterol in your blood and being flushed out by your liver and leaving the body.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what's not to love about this way of eating? It's healthy, and it's the antidote to modern diseases.
And one another interesting thing that I found is like and you can, for those of you listening or watching, you can look this up as well, as show me what is the only thing that has ever been found in mammals to extend lifespan. Right, and obviously we can't test this on human. We can just use experimentation from anecdotal.
I would say ketones.
It's calorie restriction. It's fasting. So which it makes sense.
Ketones.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be in keto. Exactly. Yeah, pretty much the same thing. So, and it makes sense when you think about it too. It's like every single major world religion,
right,
from Gandhi to Jesus to Muhammad, all incorporates fasting. Why is that? Like, it's so interesting. Why is that?
Yeah.
But yeah, when
the people we hold up as the wisest people in history have all been advocates of fasting. You're right, and the studies are shown it now and proven it, that calorie restriction in terms of fasting. Okay, so here's something I got to say. First of all, fasting is not healthy for children who are still growing. If you're a child still growing and you're like, oh, I got 10 pounds to lose. No, don't do that. Okay. Number two is that there's a difference between as a glucoburner, okay, as a non-fat adapted person, restricting calories and fasting. There's a big difference. There's a big difference between eating 300 calories a day and eating 0 calories a day. 300 calories a day is not going to be good for you, because your body thinks that there's enough coming in, the insulin goes up, the ketones don't happen, and you never get the benefits of true fasting. Right. The benefits of true fasting are the increase in adrenaline, the increase in human growth hormone. You'll find you have amazing levels of energy. You'll find you feel your mental clarity, like you said, and also the replenishing and the getting rid of all the weakness in your body. If we should just use one general term, you can probably visualize it with that term. All the weak stuff dies off and then gets replenished with via stem cells, new white blood cells. It's just an amazing therapy. But I also don't recommend, and not just me, everybody, don't recommend fasting for anyone who isn't already fat adapted. So if you want to get into fasting, you sure can. You can just go and stop eating, but you'll be in for a world of hurt for a while. It's going to be painful, literally painful for you to do that. So first thing you should do is eat a well-formulated ketogenic diet. Get fat adapted. When that flu comes that I talked about after the first week, you're going to nap a lot. Just take some time off. You need to go through that phase. And once you're done with that, you get on the other side, you get fat adapted. Now you can fast. Now you have options.
And there's actually an interesting thing that I'm not 100% convinced on this, but I've got some exogenous ketones, and I have found, and a lot of people have said, that getting through that keto fog, that these exogenous ketones, even though they're not going to, it's being advertised wrong, I think, to be honest, because they're trying to say it'll knock you into ketosis in an hour. No. And yes, you will have extra ketones in your blood because you're ingesting exogenous ketones. It's usually, the beta
hydroxybutyrate.
Exactly. Or MCT oil, like that. Yeah. But the thing is, what actually makes sense to me, promising, is this idea that if you take this, because the reason why you go through that keto fog is because your body hasn't produced the volume of ketones necessarily to power your brain, and your brain's like, shutting down. Like,
it forgets how to process sugar, and it doesn't really process ketones correctly yet either. It's sort of in that, and it only lasts a day, 2 days, maybe 3. Yeah. But here's what I think about exogenous ketones. I think that there have been studies that show their therapeutic effects for cancer patients, that the ketone bodies themselves have a positive effect on shrinking tumor cells. And so Mark Miller, for example, took exogenous ketones, and he beat cancer, by the way. He had prostate cancer, and he just went completely keto, and there's no sign of it.
Wow,
And he
nice.
also had a hyperbaric chamber, but we did a whole show on cancer and 2 keto dudes with him. Anyway, however, I think that if people expect that they can, first of all, don't expect that you can eat crap and garbage, as I say, and take some exogenous ketones and run a victory lap. It doesn't work that way.
No.
Nor do I think that it will actually help you lower insulin and glucose. It may do that in the short term.
Right.
But Richard Morris and I like to liken it to somebody who, instead of running the marathon, drives to the end and then squirts sweat on themselves.
I love
Say,
it.
look, I got sweat. I'm all cool now, right? Yeah, okay. But you really didn't. You have to. It's the process of getting and creating those ketones that has the real benefit for all of these medical problems that we were talking about. Metabolic
Exactly.
syndrome.
Yeah, I'm experimenting. The way I'm experimenting with it right now is because I'm dropping in and out like every other day. So what I'm doing is like before I'm fasted, like tomorrow, right? I'll eat my meal after I do my lifting workout, and it'll have some carbs to replenish glycogen so I can gain that anabolic effect, gain muscle while I'm losing fat actually.
Right.
And then after that, I'll be fasting, and I'll fast until 3 tomorrow afternoon. And then I will take some exogenous ketones to sort of help kick me into, so that when I run for 10 miles, that I'm not, if there's enough ketones in your blood, the theory is that your body will switch over to, especially if you're already keto adapted, which I'm keto adapted because I've done it so many times.
Yeah.
But the idea is it'll switch over, and instead of me burning through the glycogen first, it'll say, okay, well, we're just going straight into fat burning mode because we have enough ketones available to do it. I'm not 100% sure this is working, but
you have to do the experiment by doing both, taking the ketones and not taking the ketones, and see if there's any difference and measure it, so try it both ways. Yeah. But you're a scientist, you know how to do that. I have a couple more antidotes for you. One is, and I have 3 antidotes. All right. So the first one is this guy in Scotland who is 29 years old. And he was something like 400 pounds. And this was in the early 1900s, I believe. Maybe I can't remember exactly when. Maybe in the 50s. I can't remember. But he basically fasted for a year.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. Yep.
He fasted for a year. He took a little bit of yeast. And his doctor thought it might be good, but under a doctor's supervision. And he lost 190 pounds, 200 pounds or something like that. I can't remember, but he fasted for a whole year, people.
Yeah,
and
he's
he
got
was
the
fine,
record.
and he was perfectly healthy the whole time. So that was anecdote number 1. We can
multivitamins though.
Maybe
I think that's the other piece of that equation is you have to be taking a multi if you're going to fast for more than like a couple of days, because
and especially electrolytes. First of all, we need to understand what are the vitamins and minerals that are in body fat that can be utilized and what's missing.
Right.
And ultimately, I don't know if we really know that, but we do know that when you go ketogenic or you fast, your electrolytes get flushed pretty quickly by the kidneys. So you have to take extra salt, and you have to take potassium and magnesium as well. Those you're going to lose. You may have seen me drinking this aid. I make it from a combination of water, apple cider vinegar, light salt, Morton light salt, which has potassium as well as sodium. And then I take some magnesium citrate and put that in there, and a little grape flavor and some sparkling water, and I drink that when I'm not eating. All right, so antidote number 2, we interviewed a woman on 2 Keto Dudes who had been doing the ketogenic diet for 18 years.
Wow. Okay.
Because a lot of people say, the finger waggers will say, all those studies are done. They don't long-term studies, they're short-term. And no. So in the studies that Nina Teicholz has uncovered and talks about in her book, The Big Fat Surprise, a lot of them are 2-year studies, which is what's considered to be long-term. And there's even some 4-year studies. There was a study done with 9,000 people, and I believe it was in mental hospitals, where they could control what they ate over 4 years. And they tested the diet hard hypothesis. They fed, a high-fat, well-formulated ketogenic diet to a random, half of the people, and another random half, they gave them their diet they were always ate, and the results were there was no effect of saturated fat on heart disease. And And when they asked the people who, in fact, it was Ancel Keyes who did this study, and I think it was a Minnesota experiment. I'm not sure what it was, but I think that was it. He buried it and didn't. He buried the study results, and it took 16 years for them to uncover the study. And they asked a colleague of his, "Why didn't you publish the study?" And the quote was, "Well, we just weren't happy with the outcome."
Not a good day to be crucified, right?
We just weren't happy with the way it turned out. In other words, fraud, pretty much fraud.
Well, I mean, because you say something like that and then you get crucified, just like we do today, right? People are going to be commenting on this and they'll be like, "Oh, you guys are so wrong. You're killing yourselves." Blah, 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 blah. Right?
Show me the science.
Exactly.
You don't bring the science. You got nothing to say to me.
Yep.
Now, I'm perfectly willing to have my mind changed by real science, but everything that I've seen so far is either, when they test high fat diets, but they don't reduce carbs. Okay, well, that's not correct. We know what the results are going to be. They don't reduce the carbs sufficiently enough. Or there's another study where they used mice that are prone to not being able to process fat or something. There's just always something. And you also have to look at these studies. There's another thing that Nina does in her book, The Big Fat Surprise, is she uncovers the reasons why we don't consider this mainstream medicine today. Because that's the first question people have. Well, it sounds good, but it must be crackpot because that's not what everybody knows. That's not what everybody teaches. And that's why don't we know this? She asked those questions.
Yep.
And it's bullying, covering up, overt lying, and ignoring it, those are the political. And so you ask yourself why. Well, let's see. There are companies like Nestle that make carb foods on one hand, and then they own companies that make diabetes medicine.
Right.
Let me just think about that. Let that sink in for a minute. Are they evil? I don't know, but there's certainly a conflict of interest there. The statin drugs are another one.
Don't get me started.
Billions and billions pushing statins. I went off my metformin and my statins. I stopped taking them because statins have never been proven to prevent heart disease.
Yep.
Never proven.
Theoretical. Yep.
They lower cholesterol. They do that. They lower cholesterol. However, I can show you lots of studies where people who had been admitted to hospitals with a heart attack, and they looked at their cholesterol, and over half of them had low cholesterol.
Right.
Okay, you were done.
Because their arteries were all inflamed, and they had, it doesn't matter.
Therapeutic.
Yeah, the thickness of what's passing through the pipe is more important. It's both factors, but the pipe is a big factor.
Yeah, you have to have small, dense LDL particles, which you can get measured with an LDLP test.
Yep.
Or you can just calculate HDL over triglycerides. We'll calculate a score, which tells you what your small, dense LDL. You have to have those, and you also have to have inflamed arteries, and that's the 1-2 punch that is the risk factor for either a heart attack or stroke.
And one of the things I always tell people is experiment on yourself. You can't really take anyone's word for it. And even experiment, even when we look at, I've been doing lifting and bodybuilding and type of stuff in the diet and fitness for a long time. And studies come out, they contradict themselves. The problem with diet stuff is that it's self-reported and people lie. They're just it's very hard to find. So what, the best thing to do is take the best science that you can and then experiment on yourself and see what works. And it's in your case, you've dropped over 60 pounds and you've seen all your metabolic indicators improve.
Yep.
So, it's going to take someone really to convince you that that this is bad. There's
nobody's going to do that,
right?
Results don't lie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like, you know, rather than the people that are skeptical, I would say try it.
Try
See,
it.
go under medical supervision, right? Have your blood test done. We know what to test for in the
Yeah.
blood test. We can look at the metabolic factors and see if you got metabolic syndrome, and then if it improves. And if it improves when you do a ketogenic diet, then I don't know. What are you afraid of? Like, so.
What are you afraid of? Yeah. And also I would say, you know, do the research yourself. Don't take my word for it. Certainly, you know, don't take John's word for it. We just are reporting what we know and what we've read. So go read it. You know, on our podcast page, 2ketodudes.com, we have links to all the science that we cite, and any claim that we make. We have research lectures that you can see. There are books that you can read, as I mentioned, a couple of books. And there are also actual studies. And I'm not talking about news stories or blog posts. I'm talking about the actual studies that are published. And you can read them, most of them for free. And here's a hint. If they're behind a paywall, if you have to pay to read the results of the study, that's a little shaky to me. That says that something's not right. Methinks I smell a rat. There's something rotten in Denmark.
Yeah, exactly.
Words.
Oh, my phone is okay. Well, thanks. I guess we should probably be wrapping up. I should probably be going to eat now so I can go lift.
Yeah.
But I'm excited because this is a time when I get to eat the little bit of carbs before I lift, even though we're talking ketos.
And
but
me, I'm gonna build a fire on the back deck and have a few glasses of Pinot Noir, which is what I do in the evening.
So definitely, all of you listening, watching, check out 2ketodudes.com. And I'm sure you've heard of .NET Rocks. If you haven't, go check that out for sure. You can find Carl and Richard there for, I've been on the show a few times myself, and
you can certainly join our Facebook group and go to fb.2keto.com, and that will bring you to our Facebook group. It's a closed group, but we just got past the 1,000th member. And I'm telling you, this is growing like crazy. This is going to outgrow .NET Rocks.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
It's going to. We're already getting 32,000 downloads per show, and we were only on show 13. No, we're on show 20.
Oh wow, that's awesome. 20.
We just interviewed Nina Teicholz, actually. So,
well, if you ever need a guest, if you ever want to talk about my crazy
diet,
you
should at least come to the Facebook group and post what you're doing, and let people know. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Thanks again, Carl. It was great talking with you. I love geeking out on this stuff because it's so important, I think. So
I agree.
All right.
Thank you, John.
Yep. Take care.
Bye-bye.